India and Russia deepening their bond, energy commitments in the face of U.S. tariffs and sanctions, the Russian president's trip to New Delhi sending out that strong message to the West. In fact, the Russian president addressed business leaders in the national capital, reaffirming that India is making its own independent and sovereign policies and is quickly emerging as one of the fastest growing economies of the world.
And sign contracts for the supplies of oil and gas. What we want is development of our multifaceted relations with India on various fields.
The Russian president affirmed that Russia stands ready to provide uninterrupted shipments of fuel to India as Delhi faces pressure from Trump to stop buying Moscow's oil.
Energy partnership is developing successfully. Russia is a reliable supplier of energy resources and everything needed for the development of India's energy industry. We are ready to continue ensuring uninterrupted fuel supplies for India's fast-growing economy.
The Indian Prime Minister reiterated that energy security remains a strong and important pillar of the India-Russia partnership. The statement comes in the backdrop of the U.S. hitting India with an additional 25% additional tariff over its purchase of Russian oil, arguing that it was funding Moscow's war in Ukraine.
सिविल न्यूक्लियर एनर्जी के क्षेत्र में हमारा दशकों पुराना सहयोग क्लीन एनर्जी की हमारी साझा प्राथमिकताओं को सार्थक बनाने में महत्वपूर्ण रहा है। हम इस विन विन सहयोग को जारी रखेंगे। क्रिटिकल मिनरल्स में हमारा सहयोग पूरे विश्व में सिक्योर और डाइवर्सिफाइड सप्लाई चेन सुनिश्चित करने के लिए महत्वपूर्ण है। इससे क्लीन एनर्जी, हाईटेक मैन्युफैक्चरिंग और न्यू एज इंडस्ट्रीज में हमारी साझेदारी को ठोस समर्थन मिलेगा।
While the US and European nations accuse India of aiding Ukraine's war machine, research from the Independent Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air indicating that the EU's member states have purchased more than $216 billion in Russian fossil fuels. And this includes oil, refined products, pipeline gas, liquefied natural gas. Earlier in October, the Russian president questioned Trump on his tariff policies. The Russian leader asserted that the US continues to purchase uranium for its nuclear industry from Russia while pressuring countries like India to stop energy imports from Moscow. Putin said Russia was the second largest uranium supplier to the United States, and it was expected to pocket around $1.2 billion from uranium sales to America in 2025.
The historical period of undivided dominance of the West in world affairs is coming to an end. The unipolar world is becoming a thing of the past. We stand at a historical frontier.
Let's go straight across now to our correspondent, Susan Tehrani, who's been tracking those developments for us in New York. All right, we'll just try and reconnect that line with our correspondent. Meanwhile, as we continue to monitor the latest coming in and piecing together the reactions that we have been getting to you, let's just play out for you some of the statements that have been coming in. But before that, let's go back across now to our correspondent, Susan Tehrani. Susan, I was wanting to ask you first to give us a sense of what kind of sentiment we're seeing in the U.S. as a result of this visit and the meeting between the two leaders. Of course, the biggest takeaway has been that message that the two sides have sent out, and that, of course, we will be waiting for further reactions to come in from the U.S. regarding how that's being perceived.
Yeah, Molly, Washington is looking at these statements by Vladimir Putin and this meeting between the two leaders with great concern, notably when it comes to the issue of Russia supplying energy and oil for India. And as President Putin mentioned, the United States is buy Russian oil. You have Europeans who have historically been a purchaser of Russian oil. So, and then you have China, which is the biggest purchaser of Russian oil. So, you know, India sort of falls into this strong alliance with the United States on the one hand, and then being at the end of these punishments from the Trump administration on the other, which is very peculiar. Nonetheless, it's looking at it with a lot of concern because it's, according to experts, Washington is saying that we are imposing sanctions, we're imposing tariffs, yet it doesn't seem like either side is bowing down. At the same time, there is this understanding in the Trump White House that India needs to purchase oil for its population. But it worries that Moscow ultimately and the Russians are using oil for long-term strategic leverage, as notably at a time when the United States is trying to broker this peace between Russia and Ukraine. So I think there's less concern, despite what is coming out of the mouths of officials in Washington about India purchasing Russian oil. There is more concern about this alliance becoming long-term and stronger in the wake of Washington's desire to have India as a partner in the Indo-Pacific, notably to oppose China.
Indeed. Do stay on with me, Susan. Of course, a lot of key takeaways there from that meeting and overall from the visit. Let's also get in the founder and editor-in-chief of BNE IntelliNews and also former Moscow bureau chief for the Daily Telegraph onto the conversation. Ben, thank you very much for being here. I have to first ask you for your assessment of the message that's been sent out by the two leaders through their statements and overall from this visit itself.
Yeah, the visit's symbolic. I mean, they're turning into a regular thing happening every year, and they've come to talk shop. And there's various issues that they're dealing with. Top of the agenda, of course, is security, weapon supplies, the S-400 missile defense system in order to secure India's northern border. And there's also talk of Su-57 and fifth-generation fighters. And the oil is also a big issue. I mean, Putin needs markets. He's cut himself off from the West, and within 4 months he managed to reorientate all of Russia's oil exports from Europe into Asia, largely India and China. And that's important, but it's also causing a structural problem in so much as the budget, the trade deficit has blown out from 40 billion to 60 billion. You know, this is a large amount of money and it needs to be paid for. So they've got a practical problem, the two leaders, trying to work out how to do that. And that also brings in the problem of the partial convertibility of the rupee, because Russia can't just take the rupees it's earning and turn them into dollars. So there's real work to be done. But as you mentioned in your preamble, I mean, the relationship is good and it's getting deeper. They have like mutual interests. And I think for India, it's obviously economics, national interest to do business with Russia, and it's doing that in defiance of the White House. But also Putin is actually going to be a big winner from this. Of course, he's reorientated towards the BRIC countries, but he's also become extremely dependent on China. And I think he's looking at India as a very useful counterbalance. And so it's really in his interest to be as on good terms with India as he possibly can, because then that gives him some leverage in his talks with China. And of course, the relationships between China and India are not so good. So I think Modi's going to be willing to do that too. So I think this is actually an extremely important visit, and I expect these relations to only get better and stronger over time.
Indeed, and that is the larger message overall, isn't it? That there is a deep solidification and strengthening of the ties taking place on multiple fronts. Of course, a solid partnership that is only intensifying in terms of its strength and resolve. Let's also talk about the messaging regarding energy security specifically. You know, that it is a key pillar of the partnership. That's the larger word that's gone out as well. So how do you see that being perceived in the United States?
They're not going to like it, are they? I mean, it actually brings into direct conflict with Trump. I mean, China's invested heavily into green energy, and Trump, you know, he campaigned under the slogan "Drill, baby, drill," and he intends to use America's production of oil. I mean, it's become independent. It used to be a net importer, and that was driving relations with Saudi Arabia. But since the shale revolution in whenever that was, 2017, America's become a net exporter, and Trump is very aggressively pushing for market share. I mean, he's already grabbed the big chunk of the share that Russia gave up in Europe is being replaced, particularly in the gas part, by American gas, but oil as well. And so with Russia continuing to make these exports and moreover undercutting the international prices, because Russia offers a discount of up to $10 on the international cost of Brent, then that's very appealing and that makes it a serious competitor. And this is why Trump specifically targeted India with tariffs in order to try and break that relationship, to make India give up its oil imports from Russia. And it failed. Modi actually stood up to Trump in a way that the Europeans should have done, because they've also been forced into a $750 billion oil and gas import deal by Trump. And Modi very bravely stood up and said, no, it's not in our interest because the Russian oil is cheaper. Why would you buy more expensive American oil when you can buy at a big discount from Russia? And so this is going to be, I mean, effectively what it's done is also drive India and Russia closer together and away from Trump. And Trump has been so aggressive. I think people are looking for alternatives to diversify what is becoming an American risk dealing with America, because you're going to be vulnerable to these Trumpian attacks.
And then add to that the message that also went out regarding currency interoperability. How do you think that's going to be perceived, given especially the statements that we've heard coming in from the US president himself regarding the dollar?
Yeah, this is a real problem. I mean, the emerging markets or the BRICS, they've stated flat out that we want to get out from underneath dollar's dominance, and it gives the Americans a huge stick to beat people with. And this is even more serious threat than the trade tariffs are. And what they're trying to do, Modi and Putin, is to solve this conversion problem and look for alternatives. And they've tried various other currencies. At the last BRICS summit in Kazan, they floated the idea of a digital version, and so you can settle these trades not in dollars but in digital rupees and rubles, and all of the countries are developing these digital currencies. So that's coming, but it's not working yet, and it's going to be several years before it arrives. And in the meantime, you have to find workarounds. I mean, one of the most effective is people are increasingly trading in yuan, which is slowly eating into the dollar's share, but that's going very slowly too. And I don't know this is going to be a very tricky problem. They're talking about it constantly. And I know that when Putin goes to Beijing, I mean, it's top of the agenda is like, how do we get rid of the dollar? And you can't do it quickly either. But interesting, everyone's moving towards it. I mean, Russia sold all its US Treasury bills before the war started. China is selling down its Treasury bills very heavily. It's gone from 3 trillion to 700 billion. And when that gets to zero, it can't be sanctioned either. So I think people are abandoning it. But the trouble with large sums like that, you can't do anything quickly. So that one's going to remain on the agenda for the meantime.
All right. We're leaving it there for the moment. Thanks very much for being here, Ben.
Pleasure.